Well,
It's just, I mean, for one thing, being from Brooklyn, and now Brooklyn is thriving culturally, and it's no big deal, or, you know, you might want to prefer to be in Brooklyn, but then it was kind of stigmatized, and there was such a gap between Brooklyn and
big gap,
Manhattan,
yeah,
as there
yeah.
was between uptown and downtown,
Right.
and all these downtown legends, and mainstream, or the New York Times.
Right. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. I mean,
Yeah.
because it was, you know, the last apartment that I lived in Brooklyn, my parents was in, it was a building that entered on both Lincoln Place and Eastern Parkway. And my bedroom, I could see the entire Manhattan skyline from my 5th floor bedroom. It was wonderful. And when my parents moved to Park Slope, my brother took it over, and then he moved down to Washington for a job, and I could have taken over that apartment, which is a fabulous rent-controlled 5-room apartment with a view of Manhattan. And I asked everyone I knew, because I'd already been living in Manhattan for 3 years now, if I move back to Brooklyn, will you come visit me? No, 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 no. I'll pay your cab fare back to, no, no, no. My life is here now. I'm gonna have to give up that great apartment, but my life is here. And the thing about that was, I mean, you had to be in New York. I mean, you just, I mean, if you wanted to be part of certain things, you had to be in Manhattan. It's really what it felt like. But the other thing that I love about it, do you remember Guy Trebay wrote this wonderful column about downtown New York on the occasion of one of Peter Hujar's exhibits. And he asked me what, you know, what that whole period was like. And this is what I remember, is that it was like, it was so wide open. You could do anything. I mean, you could set yourself up as a painter, a sculptor, a filmmaker, a photographer, a writer. All anyone cared about was, can you do it? I mean, you didn't have to have a credential. You didn't have to have an MFA. You didn't have. Some people had them, like Ken Tisa had an MFA when he arrived. Ethel had gone to the American Academy, but not everyone had. I mean, some people just jumped in and did what they wanted to do right off the bat without any formal training at all. And all that anyone cared about was, is the work any good? Is it interesting? Keep going. You know, just, you know, and you could flail, you could fail, you could flop, and just, you know, then do something again. I mean, it was so, you know, when I was teaching, I taught at Brooklyn College in the 90s, and just knowing the difference between my youth and theirs was really heartbreaking, because I knew back then that no matter what, I could get a job at any moment of the day. I mean, I could get a job in an hour if I really, really needed to make some money. I could go out and I could find some kind of rotten job. I mean, and I was a janitor at the bottom line for a while. I cleaned houses. I did anything. My mother's best friend Maureen used to say, you gotta hand it to Stephen. He'd shovel shit against the wind to make a buck, and he never asked you for anything. And it was true. I mean, I would do anything to make money if I needed to. And when I think about what my students had to go through to find jobs, and how they were being weeded out by computer programs, even in the 90s, I think, you know, it's just such a different world now. I mean, there's a kind of, I know there was a lot wrong with that period, but the 70s have a magic to me that is not reproducible anymore. I mean, my 70s anyway, yeah.
You talked about each story sort of having an overarching narrative that holds it together. What do you think is the narrative of the book?
Me. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, it's...
But that's a lot of, I mean, there are probably many books that can be written. This, Alan said it encapsulates the 70s.
Well,
so it could be a book
it's
the
actually,
80s
it's got a
too.
much more specific focus in that.
Okay.
This is sort of cannibalized from another larger project that I haven't finished yet. I was working for years on a memoir called 50 Jobs in 50 Years, which was a working tour of my life. I mean, that's really what it was. Because I've done so many different things in so many different areas that I thought of it as a picaresque memoir. You know, I wasn't going to give you a narrative line. You were just going to see from one moment to the next who he was. And I would go in and out of worlds so regularly, and I liked it because I didn't have to be the center of attention in the story. The world I entered was the focus as much as me, as much as my interaction with it. You know, there were all these various pockets in New York that I got to explore. And so these pockets are more about the downtown art and theater world. So there's that focus, which is why the Hujar photographs hold it together, because every one of those photographs is someone mentioned in the book. Jim.
I see. I'm just wondering about the voice of your voice has a very interesting, I call it's sort of like ambitious but not lost. There's in midst of all of you're almost always in some low place,
Right.
and within that low place, this is not great expectations.
Right, right.
This is somehow living in this moment that is so rare and so valuable. And I wondered if you had thought about that.
I was aware of that even when I was going through all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I always had I was always both terrified and supremely self-confident at the same time. I don't know how to explain that, but I was always terrified at every moment. But at the same time, I was not going to give up. I mean, for one thing, I was afraid because I didn't have anything to go back to. My parents were financially a wreck because of my father's gambling, and I didn't want to go back there. And I was always afraid of losing my mind. I always felt like I was somehow, my conflicts were going to just tear me apart from the middle, and somehow I was going to just wind up babbling on the street. That was a genuine fear of mine, which was partly why I was writing my journal. Like, get it out, get it out, get it out. Some of the pages and some of the years, I'm screaming on the page, just like I might have been if I had been that lunatic wandering around 14th Street telling the world what's wrong with him. But I remember someone asking me about that, and I said, I've always had this kind of arrogant self-confidence that somehow I'm going to make it okay. I mean, why I thought that, I don't know. There was every chance I wouldn't. I mean, there really was. I mean, the fact that I didn't die, this is my favorite line from 12-Step World. When you were drinking and drugging and you had that feeling of impending doom, that was impending doom. No kidding. It was right behind you, right that minute then. And we all survived it, the ones who are still around. I mean, a lot of people did not. There are a lot of dead people in that book, So. Hi.
Hi, I'm curious about your time with the Cockettes, and maybe I need to read the book.
Okay.
But
Please.
were you in San Francisco?
Oh, no. I lived in San Francisco many years later for 6 miserable months. It was the worst weather in 100 years. I arrived in December and left in June, and it was the coldest, wettest winter in 100 years. And I was living in, many places. I mean, typical. I mean, I lived first in the Castro, then in the Mission, then in the Embarcadero YMCA, then in Potrero, and finally said, get back to New York. I mean, this is fucked up. But it was not a good time, and I was also reaching the end of my drinking. So, I mean, I ran into people that I'd known, like I ran into John Flowers when I was out there from the Cockettes, and I would see him periodically. I would see Fayette, but the Cockette, I was never really part of that group. I just happened to work for that opening night at the Anderson Theater.
Oh, sorry, what year were you in San Francisco?
80 to 81.
Okay.
We didn't know each
I was
other.
across the
You were in Berkeley?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have the,
Shucks, we just missed
not
each
as
other.
cold as, yeah.
So were you doing lighting with the Cockettes?
No. I was selling. There was a publication called Picture Newspaper, which was produced by Steve Lawrence and Peter Ujar, and it was a broadsheet that published only photographs, without captions even, I think.
It's just republished.
Just republished, yeah, in a very thick volume. And there had been an issue of it devoted to the Cockettes. So all these photographers photographed all the Cockettes while they were in New York preparing for the opening. And so Steve was selling that newspaper edition at the Cockettes opening at the Anderson Theater.
At the end.
And I was hired to sell it. It was an interesting crowd. Fran Lebowitz was an usher that night at the Cockettes opening. Yeah, hi.
Did you ever work with the Angels of Light?
No, I didn't. No. Shayla did. Shayla housed them.
Yeah.
Shayla deserves a book of her own.
Shada Bakal, who was a photographer. She had been a model in the 60s, She was a close friend of Peter Hujor, Paul Tech, Jack Smith, Quentin Crisp, all of those people. And she died in 97 or 98. She lived on 3rd Street in the Hells Angels block. And she did a lot of work in the 70s, particularly of this New York, this downtown theater scene. She loved spectacle, and I think the whole reason she produced those 2 reviews, which were, Steve writes about them in one chapter, but all these cameo performances by everybody who was anybody in that downtown scene, the Palm Casino reviews, and I think that she just produced them in order to be able to photograph those people, like have access to them. And there was a show earlier this year at a new nonprofit called Soft Network, and there will be another one in the context of a group show next summer of her work. It hadn't been seen since around the time that she died.
Yeah.
Penny Arcade, the performer, is the custodian of her estate and had it in storage all those years, and finally found a young art historian, Marcelo Yanez, who
Brilliant guy.
helped her go through the archive, and he curated this amazing show. And Marcelo is also the person that republished that Hujor newspaper called Newspaper in the thick volume. Before that thick volume, he did a couple of issues that were just a revival of the newspaper, and then he did this big anthology of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it, thank you. And Steve will sign books now if you want to.
Yay.